Hi, everyone. My name is Zuri Berry. I'm a journalist, consultant, and podcast producer. For the past 20 years, I've worked in newsrooms, large and small, and have done everything from freelance reporting to editing major newspapers and working in public media. During those 20 years, I've had an opportunity to get a pretty good understanding of the ebbs and flows of our industry. And I can say I have personally experienced some of the worst we have to offer. That includes layoffs, bankruptcy, and two acquisitions, all of which were destabilizing and disruptive. And every single time, those events were preceded by tremors in the market, or in the case of 2008, a full blown recession. More on that in a moment. Now we're seeing more tremors in the market. Nothing exorbitant, at least yet, but more economists are forecasting a recession in the near future. Last week, former Boston Fed President Eric Rosengren said that it's, quote, quite likely the US has a mild recession next year, end quote. That's driven by inflation up 8% in October, and that was good news, higher interest rates, and a tight labor market. We're here to discuss one thing: how to recession-proof your news business. This conversation is hosted by the Pivot Fund. So thank you to Tracy Powell, the Pivot Fund CEO, who has already earmarked $2 million to 7 BIPOC-led news organizations in Georgia and is committed to giving $4 million more. But she also has this ambitious plan for the Pivot Fund to distribute $500 million nationally to Black, Indigenous, and people of color-led news outlets. So a double thank you for the work that you do, Tracy. And this conversation is sponsored by the Donald W. Reynolds Journalism Institute at the University of Missouri. And it stems from the deep concern for publishers and the growing angst over the current economic climate. So there's two sets of facts I'd like to share before we get started. First, as a reminder, during the last recession between September 2008 and February 2010, the U.S. lost more than 6 million jobs. The employment levels prior to the Great Recession weren't recovered until 2014, even though the vast majority of those jobs never came back to the news industry. Canada lost a net of 400,000 jobs, all of which is to say that donations and discretionary spending will change dramatically in a recession-like environment. And that has an outsized influence on the news business. The same is true of ad spending, which brings me to the second set of facts. After the 2008 recession, U.S. ad spending declined by some estimates at 30%. News publishers lost 27% of their ad revenue. Radio lost 22%, magazines lost 18%, and TV lost 5%. The only thing that was almost flat was digital, with a 2% decline. So as you all know, many of these sectors of our industry did not recover. In fact, the fallout of the 2008 recession is that news publishers are conducting very different businesses today. The news business has shifted to focus primarily on securing subscriptions, memberships, donations, and grants, while decreasing its dependency on advertising. So my concern, which I hope is your concern as well, is if we're experiencing some kind of economic decline, giving and news subscriptions will be among the first things that consumers cut from their spending. So to discuss the prospect of this challenging environment in front of us and what we can do about it, we've gathered this amazing group of panelists. And they include Mr. Justin Rushing. He is the Director of Growth and Partnerships at iNewsSource in San Diego, California. Prior to that, he held positions as the Director of Advertising for the Daily Memphian and Contemporary Media and has served as a digital media specialist and marketing consultant. Welcome, Justin.
Thank you.
We also have Miss Anita Lee. She is the founder and editor-in-chief of The Green Line in Toronto, a bootstrapped startup that launched just this year. She is a media consultant and journalism instructor. She sits on the board of directors for Lion, that is the local independent online news publisher association. And she has held numerous editing, reporting, and directorial positions across Canada and in New York. And we are also expecting Mr. Glenn Burkins. He is the founder and publisher of QCityMetro.com. That is Queen City for those who know. in Charlotte, North Carolina. He has helmed Q City Metro since 2008. Prior to that, he served as the deputy managing editor at the Charlotte Observer and as a reporter for the Wall Street Journal, Philadelphia Inquirer, and St. Petersburg Times. I want to thank you all for being here. And thank you to the Reynolds Journalism Institute for sponsoring. At the end of this, we're going to open it up for some audience questions towards the end. But seeing how we're still waiting on Glenn, I want to get into the current state of affairs with our panelists. Anita, let me start with you because I want to ask you about starting up the Green Line at this point in time as we're coming off the height of the pandemic. So the business environment is already difficult, but you obviously saw an opportunity. Can you give us a sense of what you're seeing as a new business, both the challenges and opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks so much for having me, Zuri and Tracy. It's an honor to be here. So again, my name is Anita, and I run a hyperlocal independent news outlet based in Toronto that's all about investigating the way we live to help young and other underserved Torontonians survive and thrive in a rapidly changing city. So from um, the value proposition of a mission that I just shared with you can see a bit of the potential that I saw in launching the outlet. So when I first started kind of laying the groundwork to launch my startup, which eventually debuted in April 2022, earlier this year, I started actually at the beginning of the pandemic. So just slightly before March 2020. And I had a slow rollout. So I had a soft launch that occurred in October 2021 before the full website launch in April 2022. At the time, I felt that Toronto is actually an oversaturated media market. It is the largest city in Canada. There's like fantastic papers of record, including the Toronto Star and a lot of other emerging media startups that were popping up in the city. So it's a very fair question you're asking, like why now, especially during during a time when the pandemic, a lot of publications were experiencing downturns in the revenue, right? So if you remember that. So for me, I saw an opportunity to serve an underserved audience that had not yet been monetized by any sort of other market alternatives or competitors in the Toronto media landscape. And underserved Torontonians are they're widespread across the city. So although Toronto itself is an oversaturated media market and is well served, there are a lot of news deserts or news donuts within the city. And for those of you who aren't familiar, news deserts are areas of a geographic area that is underserved by existing media, although they have like a distinct population, usually a sizable population. And donuts are basically, as the name implies, it's areas within like well-served media markets, but they're little pockets that are not well served. And I grew up in an area, a suburb called Scarborough, which is an inner suburb in Toronto. It's full of people of color. It's largely working class and heavily racialized. So that was my experience growing up in the city. And I always felt like the news did not reflect the full nuance of my community that I grew up in. I actually really loved growing up in Scarborough, but oftentimes there would be stereotypes of crime and grime. So to me, I always saw, especially in the last few years when I worked at The Discourse, which is a community-driven publication based in BC, I started to see and reframe certain markets. I saw, okay, like I understand this community, I understand this market, understand underserved communities. I'm born and raised in the city, so why not launch this now, especially when there's a need for it? And yeah, that's kind of the cold version.
Thank you. Thank you. And I see we do have Glenn here with us. So thank you for joining us, Glenn.
Apologize for being late.
No worries. I'm just glad to have you here. Anita, can I just follow up on one aspect of what you just said there? The opportunity,
Absolutely.
obviously, that an underserved audience, obviously, that you want to respond to with the
Yeah.
Green Line. What is the business model that you guys are working off of?
So the current business model is, I want to diversify my revenue streams, but I have to be strategic because eventually I want to make sure that we're largely member funded or subscription based. And that's what we're moving towards. But in order to be able to be in a good financial position to support the infrastructure that a membership model needs, because it is a big commitment. It's a very high touch. You're trying to really deepen engagement and connection to your members. So it's not something that you just kind of say you're doing without really investing in it. So at this point, especially in the early phases, I had sponsorship funding. from certain sources, and also foundation funding from the Indian Spirit Foundation, which is a foundation that supports that its mandate is focused on racial equity. So they often they like the work that I do and they supported me. And I also bootstrap. So that's a big thing that I want to mention because I think I'm sure, a lot of people of color can relate to this. I didn't come from money. I couldn't, borrow a bunch of money from my parents or anyone that I knew. Like I wasn't somebody who was like, knew a bunch of rich people to call up. So I had to plan. And part of the plan, and I'll give you the short version of this, is I launched a newsletter called The Other Wave, which is an innovation newsletter that's focused on the Canadian media market. And I knew that I understood diverse audiences. I knew that I understood engagement deeply, and I knew I had ideas for how to monetize those audiences. So it was a trifecta of expertise that I had, and I started consulting organizations on that particular kind of trifecta of just strategies effectively. And so through the consultancy that I founded and the newsletter that I founded, which was back in 2019 after I left my last full-time job, I was able to generate enough money to be able to invest about $20,000 into my own company. And I can stretch a budget. I can make money go really far. So even though the initial funding that I was able to get wasn't a huge amount, um, the way I was able to manage it, it's almost inherent. It's like I was taught budgeting when I was a kid, and I'm a child of immigrants. My parents were really, really, really good about. They also had their own business. My parents also had their own business as well, so I was able to see firsthand how to be able to responsibly run a small business like my father has. So that's kind of the trajectory. It's not, the type of story that you hear in venture, where, you raise a bunch of money and you get valued, your company gets valued at a high amount. Like this is a different kind of trajectory and story that I feel is really important to share with other people who are in similar circumstances as me, who don't have the networks and don't come with like the money in their families.
Yeah, and like many other news entrepreneurs who are probably in the Pivot Funds audience here, obviously you have to show what you can do before people do want to invest and support and all of those things. The money isn't just thrown your way on an idea or on a whim. So I certainly appreciate that. Justin, let me ask you about your current view of the landscape right now, and let me just double team, if you will, this question, Justin. What's going on right now at iNewsSource in terms of your revenue and sustainability at this point of the year?
Sure. I think right now, our publishers are in a very interesting place within the landscape of the industry to figure out ways to get more readers to engage with their content. It used to be a one-to-one. People pick up a newspaper or people go to a website. I think now you have these, or you have so many different channels in which one can engage with you. So it's really looking at your audience, looking at how they engage currently, looking at how they're engaging with other media outlets, how they're engaging with anything unrelated to media. How people are doing everything. Creates a behavior, and it's a journey involved in it. So for us, we're really trying to dive in deep to be able to understand where our active readers are and where our potential readers are in the marketplace, and be able to hone in and increase our engagement strategies to drive more readers to all of our content through web, email, and social. As that pertains to revenue, right now we're in the process of building a foundation to our earned revenue model. Right now, primarily our funding comes straight through foundations, annual donors, monthly donors, and so forth. But with this new strategic focus, we're looking to build and expand our audience to be able to support our earned revenue model, which will come through events, community forums, seminars, as well as building an advertising platform through our website, and some other things I can't yet to speak on. So those are the things that we're looking at, to be more sustainable, to be able to build an earned revenue model to, complement our fundraising model.
And Justin, you sound like your organization, iNewsSource, is sort of similar to where other nonprofits are, really building out and expanding upon those monthly donations and annual donations and foundation gifts that you guys receive. iNewsSource is a fantastic outlet for investigative journalism if you haven't checked it out. Can you also give us a sense of what a day like Giving Tuesday means to nonprofits like iNewsSource?
Yes. I mean, this is a big part of the year for us to be able to increase the awareness of who we are, the work that we've been able to publish throughout the year, as well as a opportunity to re-engage, our existing donor base, and showing where their funding has gone. I mean, we've done some tremendous investigations and some tremendous accountability work that we like to highlight, but our donors are our cheerleaders as well. They sing our praises and they are able to help us align, other funders similar to them who appreciate the work that we're doing. So we kicked off, this giving season by participating in the local campaign initiative called San Diego Gives, and which was very successful for us. This year, our director of philanthropy is launching our investigative news fund, in which we have a goal of raising $500,000, in which we've already secured 50% of it as we kick off. So this is a huge part for us. We're excited about it to be able to engage, active donors and potential donors locally for sure.
Nice. Very cool. Very cool. And glad to see that you guys are so well on your way at this point of the year. Glenn, let me bring you in here. I started this by talking a little bit about the prior recession and what that impact was in terms of both jobs, but also in terms of the news industry. And a recognition that our business is not the same as it once was. You launched Q City Metro back in 2008, right? At the
I
beginning of
did.
all of this. So you know what it's like to launch in a challenging market. Can you tell us about those early days? And I think for everyone here, they're probably interested in the how. That is, how did you earn revenue at that time? And how did you survive as a new business owner?
We are a for-profit model, and I can definitely relate to what Anita was saying. As you pointed out, we launched in 2008, in the middle of the Great Recession, the worst economy since the Great Depression. And on top of that, this whole concept of local media, local independent media was brand new. Advertisers were not sure what to make of it. It is much, much easier to get advertisers today than it was then. There were no foundations at that point looking to give money to media startups. I essentially funded it myself. I would estimate that during that recession, I probably put $300,000 of my own money into launching Q City Metro, hiring people, keeping it going. I didn't take a salary myself. It was extremely difficult.
And given that experience and what you're seeing in terms of the last couple years, this challenging market with the pandemic, what's your view of our current economic landscape?
I'm concerned. When I read the Wall Street Journal every day. I'm seeing more and more layoffs, especially in the tech sector, but I'm starting to see more layoffs in other parts of the economy. It does appear that we very well could be heading for a recession. We're clearly not there yet, and people who are much smarter than I am are saying they think we may be able to achieve a soft landing, but things are not looking good, and for that reason, we're having conversations with our team now about belt tightening, things that we may have. When things are going well, you tend to focus on revenue. You tend to focus on how much money can we bring in. When things are not going well economically, you also have to think about where can we tighten our belt. So we're trying to have those conversations now before things become problematic.
And let's just get right into that then. What is that conversation like with your staff?
Well, it's an ongoing conversation. We had a conversation just this morning, in fact, about that. It's not, I've made clear that the people who are on our team, we will look to keep on our team at all costs. But there are other areas that we may have to tighten. Everything. We're going to be looking at everything from our tech stacks. What do we really need? What are we paying for that we may not be using? To team lunches. Those. Those add up. We're looking at uh, uh, our insurance policies. Can we squeeze a little bit more money out of our insurance policies while still giving our employees what they need in terms of health insurance? So everything from top to bottom, we're kind of looking at, because what we don't want to do is lay anyone off. And so we're talking about shifting more work to freelancers rather than hiring. There is no hiring at this point with Q City Metro. Anything that we're looking to do, we're looking to do through contract workers until we have a little better idea where the economy's going.
Anita, let me bring you in here. I'd like to get your thoughts on this as well, because cost cutting is so much, or keeping costs under control is so important to this story. As news publishers, we love our subscriptions, our tools, as Glenn pointed out, our tech stacks. We add to them constantly. And it's no fun talking about cutting any of that. What are some of the ways that news publishers can be, I guess, more disciplined around costs? And Glenn has offered his thoughts here. Anita, I'd like to hear yours, and Justin, if you have any thoughts as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So the interesting thing about launching a news business before the pandemic, and then, kind of it in some ways like scaling up. We're not going to be scaling up, but kind of we're at this critical point. We're going to be producing more output, and I have some strategic partnerships coming in 2023 during recession. It's kind of interesting because you're already in this cost saving mindset, or at least a mindset of prudence. And so I already started to think about these things well before the recession. And one thing that I've done is I take kind of a portfolio approach to my career, and in other areas of my career, including as a teacher and consultant, I actually leverage some of the benefits that I have from those areas of my career into the green line. And I'll explain a bit in just a second. One of those is actually staffing. So I have about 9 folks on my team. 3 of whom are part-time staff, and then the rest who I describe as fellows, who are interns, who are very advanced. They're either top graduates in their final year, or top students, J school students in their final year, or top grads, fresh grads. So what I actually do is I have a 3-month fellowship contract where I pay them half monetarily and half in in-kind consultation. So and it's based on a livable wage in the province of Ontario. So we have provinces in Canada; those are equivalent to states in the US. And livable wage in our province is $22 an hour. So I calculate the full amount for how much they work for the entirety of the 3 months, and then I divide that up into monetary compensation and then in-kind consultation. And I always explain to them, obviously it's consent based. If they don't like the offer, they can walk away. Oftentimes, it's actually something that they really receive well, because of the fact that I am a full-time consultant. That's actually how I make my main living. And it's not a throwaway. It's something where I can help them on things that are not green line related, whether it's, like helping them with their graduate school essays, like coaching them on, how to adjust their resumes, just things that will help early career journalists. So that has been a really kind of beneficial arrangement with my fellows. And it's been really effective since I launched the publication. So that's one way of actually cost cutting or cost saving without, damaging relations with your team or your staff. And the other thing that I want to mention in terms of learning connections is that I'm an instructor at multiple colleges, one in New York City University in New York, and then 2 here in Toronto Metropolitan University and Centennial College. And oftentimes I have direct pipelines to some of the best students who can then serve as unpaid interns because they get a credit. So they're not being exploited or anything of that nature. or I develop some sort of really positive relationship with them. So they're really excited about the work that we do at the Green Line and they're more willing to take on the fellowship that's like half in kind consultation and half monetary compensation. So just creative ways of thinking through your resources and leveraging the partnerships to benefit, just kind of leverage those cost savings is a good approach to take.
That's really interesting and innovative, I would say. I haven't heard
Yeah.
that before. So very cool. Justin, any thoughts in terms of keeping costs under control as you're thinking about things and in your experience, if you will, from newsrooms, but also in your current role?
Yeah. I could speak about where we are organizationally. Anita kind of touched on, we have um, an initiative to always want to work with young media professionals. And we've been very successful in landing some great reporters to Report for America, who've been doing some great work with us and some of which have, transitioned to full-time roles with us, since going through that program. And then also, we always look to onboard interns to be able to work with them hands-on and give them hands-on experience through our product as well. We recently just hired a new content manager, as well as a new product manager, in which we prior to that had an audience engagement editor who was focused around both content and product. But we feel at this point to be able to realign our focus strategically, we definitely needed, one person devoted to maximizing the value of the content and another person devoted to maximizing the value of the product. So that rounds out our staff from a full-time capacity. But when it comes to, being more cost efficient, I mean, Glenn touched on it, we're looking at everything that we're doing, as far as where we're spending money when it comes to our tech stack, different services and, third party partnerships that we have. Are there opportunities that we could get those same services for cheaper? We definitely want to be able to look at that objectively. But then also just looking at what we're doing from a workflow standpoint, I think we become so dependent on technology to do things that people can do, right? So I think we always want to be able to look at what our workflow is and figure out ways that we can, readdress those things. And if it can save us money, we go in that direction opposed to looking at it just from a convenience standpoint, and wanting to add something that may or may not, increase our efficiency. When we look at spending for our tech stack, we're always looking at ways to be able to increase automation as well as effectiveness. And so, we kind of look at it from that standpoint. And, within the team of people that I manage, we have a slogan, just because you can doesn't mean that you should. So, we always look at everything, what I feel is the right way before we pull the trigger on anything.
In past newsrooms I've been in, the fight has been over, well, we already have Microsoft Teams and it handles this communication thing. And we also have Slack. Why do we have both? The IT guys would always come back and say, well, cut the Slack. And then, of course, there's that tussle, if you will, in the newsroom about what tool we want to use and why. And so it's difficult conversations all around. And I imagine you guys are having those as well. Glenn, let me stick with you for just a moment here. What's the worst case scenario for you in any kind of economic downturn? Or put another way, what are you counting on that needs to go right?
Well, I guess in a perfect world, the economy would not go into recession, or if it does go into recession, it would not be a deep recession. We're in a pretty good place. I think we're in a place where we can handle a moderate recession that doesn't stretch on too long. During the good times, we were able to put aside some reserves. One of the strategies that I always had when we would get a grant is I would never spend our grant money on personnel. I would always invest that money in a way that hopefully it would bring in more revenue rather than, as they say, rather than eating your seed corn. I wanted to plant that corn so that it would grow more corn rather than going out, hiring a bunch of people. Then when the grant's gone, well, how do I keep them on staff? And so we've had some luck at that. We've grown some areas of our business by investing some of the grant money we've gotten over the years. And rather than growing fast, or rather than hiring as many people as we could, we were able to put aside some reserves. So I think we're fairly well suited for a recession, provided it's not too deep and it doesn't last too long.
Anita, same question for you. What's the worst case scenario for you, or what needs to go right?
Um, I mean, if it's a tough question for me to answer at this stage in the development of the Green Line, because I feel like I need to go through. I feel like I need to go through like a full season of being a media owner before I can appropriately say that. Um, I, I mean, hopefully this isn't a cop out answer, but I, I don't know if there's a worst case scenario. I think I have the mindset of, because I'm bootstrapping this, because I am starting out, I'm just starting out. I don't necessarily have a worst case scenario in mind as of yet. To me, in some ways, like it's kind of a counterintuitive thing to think about, but because I'm launching in a recession, in some ways that allows, in some ways, it eases the pressure. Strangely, I know there's like a lot of barriers that I have to face, but starting a media business at any time has its challenges, especially as somebody who, like I said, doesn't come from money. So for me, I actually think it's just in some ways, if I'm able to emerge um, and survive the next season and eventually get to sustainability, I feel like it'll be even more of a coup, if that makes sense. I know that's not quite like maybe the answer you're looking
No,
for,
but I think it speaks to that entrepreneurial mindset that you need to have. Sort of
yeah.
down the hatches. And let's just make our way through. And actually, we're going to get to that in just a second. But let's keep this conversation going and talk about some tactics here. Justin, you actually you were talking about this a little bit, and I'd like to peel this open just a little bit more about incentivizing your relationships and with those advertisers or funders or donors. Can you talk a little bit more about what that might look like and how news publishers could create those incentives for folks to stick with you through any kind of economic downturn?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think when you look at what your product offering is, usually we normally have advertisers who are buying one out of the three things that, we offer, or two out of the five things that we offer. So I think looking at where you are on capacity and, where you can be a little bit more flexible to be able to give these, active advertisers a chance to be able to try some new things with you. I think product pairing is a great way to incentivize, active advertisers. I think new business as well. I always feel like when you go out and you can get an advertiser on 1 month and they never advertise again, I mean, I think that doesn't benefit you or the advertiser in that case. So I think when you look at being able to offer small discounts on 3 month commitments, and, being able to, offer them some visibility to get going with you so they can see your value and give you a chance to, work with them one-on-one and consulting with them, helping them come up with their ad message, helping them, develop their ad creative. That gives you that opportunity to be able to develop their relationship for a long-standing relationship. So I think those two things play hand to hand. I think one, you have to have a consultative approach, and I think you have to be mindful about your product and be intuitive to your product on what it can do, based on what your capacity is and what you can be flexible on and what you want to sell and offer from an incentive-based standpoint.
Nice. Nice. Thank you for that. And then let me just note as well for those in the audience that if you want to ask a question, please do so in the chat and we'll pick it up after we get through this next section of the conversation. Glenn, let me ask you, for organizations like yours that are also grant funded, what opportunities are there to be better stewards of the funds that you receive?
Well, I think I touched on one. If you're fortunate enough to get a grant, uh, in my opinion, the worst thing you can do is just kind of fritter that money away, or go out and go on a hiring spree, because sooner or later that grant money is going to be gone, and you've got to keep those people on your payroll, or at least you certainly want to keep those people on your payroll. So I guess I would give three pieces of advice. First, look for ways to spend that money wisely, in ways that it will grow and it will bring in more revenue. And my philosophy has always been that I want to run Q City Metro on its operating revenues and not on the grant money. The grant money I get is for investing in the future. That is for new initiatives that we think will bring in more revenue a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road. I don't know if it was Sam Walton with Walmart or someone else who said, if you pay attention to the pennies, the dollars will take care of themselves. So when we talk about things like reviewing your tech stack to see if you're using all the products you've signed up for. In our case, we've been in business 14 years. We've signed up for a lot of things in 14 years. So we have to go through every now and then and say, is this something we're really using? Is there a free or lower cost option? Paying attention to the pennies so that the dollars can take care of themselves. The other thing that we do, as I mentioned, or that one other thing that we're preparing to do that I mentioned, is fortunately, we're able to have a reserve now. Up until now, that money has just sat in a checking account because there was nothing else to do with it. You want to keep it safe. You don't want to tie it up into something that's going to be speculative or whatever. And so it sat in a checking account earning 0% interest because there was just nowhere else to go. But as the Fed has raised interest rates, we're starting to see some fairly short-term CDs, 3 months, 6 months, that are paying 4 and close to 5%. So we are working with our accountant now to set up a brokerage account so that we can put some of that money in a place where it will actually earn interest. You don't want to tie it up long term because this is money you might need. So we're talking about staggering our reserves, some of it in perhaps 3-month CDs, maybe some in 6-month CDs, maybe we'll go out a year on a smaller amount, so that not only so that money is not just sitting there, so that it's working for us. So when you put all of those things together, I think that's what Sam Walton meant about paying attention to the pennies so that the dollars will take care of themselves. The other thing that I would say is that when I first launched the business, I thought I could do way more than I could do. And one of the smartest things I did, and I wish I had learned it from the very beginning, was to invest in an accountant, someone who can help me think through these things, someone who can advise me. We saved tens of thousands of dollars a year because our accountant said, you're organized wrong for tax purposes. If you change the way you're organized, you would pay a lot less in tax. So we did that, and we're paying a lot less in tax. So even if she did nothing else, she's paid for herself just in that. So invest in someone who knows more about business and accounting and taxes. Someone who can be a partner, someone who can hold your hand and look over your books each month and say, here's an area where I think you can cut. You're out of line in this area. I think you're paying a little more over here than I think you should. So, once again, if you pay attention to the pennies, the dollars will take care of themselves.
Glenn, thank you. Lots of great points there. And the accounting one, it always strikes me because it's something that, even for solopreneurs, if you will, it's a big one.
And if for nothing else, Zuri, it just relieves such a headache.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
Even if you save nothing, if you will, it's just taking that headache off your plate so that you can focus on the things you're good at. I'm not good at bookkeeping, and I know that. And so I don't want to put that on my plate.
Gotcha. Anita, what opportunities do you see for news orgs to evolve their business strategy or provide some form of innovative approach at the very least at this point in time, given all of what we've discussed here?
Well, I'll talk about, I have a lot of consulting clients across North America through my consultancy the other way, so I can talk about what I've seen there. But I just want to say, man, like everything that's coming out of Glenn's mouth is like gold. I'm just taking notes in the corner over here from somebody who's such an expert. And that accountant comment so resonated with me because I'm actually in the process of getting a bookkeeper right now. And oh, finally. So in terms of what I'm seeing in terms of consulting clients, a lot of folks are investing in diversity, equity, inclusion, and not for the reasons that you may think. In fact, a lot of it has to do with trying to diversify the audiences that they're serving, because obviously when you actually open yourself up to more audiences, there's more opportunities to monetize folks that you might not have served before. So one thing that was apparent during the pandemic were community focused publications that really developed relationships, which has been the theme of this webinar so far, have deepened relationships with their audience members and the community members, and just have really trusting, engaged relationships with them, survived better and thrived better during the pandemic. So one thing that I've been consulting folks on in addition to DEI is connecting that to to a membership model. And a membership model is fantastic because during recession times, corporate sponsorship can dry up, foundation funding can dry up. But, even if you have some attrition and lose some members, individual members on the whole, like if you're continuing to deliver meaningful journalism to your audience members, you still have a large pool of individual contributors sustaining you at your core, which is why having a really great, like a really robust revenue stream that's membership focused is something that I've seen a lot of publications moving towards. Especially since ad revenue, and this kind of dovetails with the decline of digital ad revenue as well. So I know that publications even before the recession were really keen on kind of uh, like just strengthening their membership and subscription offerings.
Let me ask this for you first, Anita, and then obviously open it up to others here. Let's say this recession does occur. And again, we've only sort of got hints of it, and there's sort of these prognoses that are out there. But like Glenn said, a lot of people who are smarter than I am are certainly expecting this, which is why we're doing this webinar. How do you prepare yourself to come out on the other side of it? And what are you telling those clients, by the way?
So to prepare to get out on the other side, I mean, I think it's just being prudent about your cash flow. And also just, I mean, there's a couple of things the one thing that really resonated that what Glenn said was not like investing in the infrastructure of your company as opposed to staff, because you're really focusing on how to um, just support revenue generation, right? Because if during recession time, you can't afford to hire staff, they're all completely gone and you haven't invested in your core business, then that's going to be an issue. So that's the one thing that I'm really focused on. And it remains to be seen for me because I, like I said, I haven't gone through a full season of my business yet. So that's something that I'm really focused on. I got actually a recent injection of grant funding from the Google News Initiative Equity Fund. And I am like, one of the first things I was doing is actually investing in a bookkeeper and accountant, rather than kind of diverting that to content production. So that's one thing.
Justin, yourself? How do you prepare your org and your colleagues for maybe coming out on the other side of a potential recession?
I think that's a really good question. I mean, for us right now, we're so entrenched on trying to build a better relationship with our readers, as well as creating a better reader experience. and I'm not saying that we're overlooking the recession. I think we want to advance our product in ways to be able to maintain the funding that we are getting and to create new ways to be able to earn revenue. I mean, I will say and it's conversations that we're having, in lieu of and I think Glenn kind of touched on it is, where are we, doing any ill-advised spending? How can we clean it up? How can we get in front of that? How can we prepare for that? Right now, we're staffed to the point to where we've reached our staffing goal and we have everyone in place to do the work that we want to do. So I guess the biggest thing for us, right now is to be able to stay in front of donors, to be able to have those ongoing conversations and prove value to our product and hoping that we can continue to sustain, those philanthropic dollars that we do receive. And looking at a, recession, I mean, of course, the foundation dynamic for, those publishers who rely on that funding, that's something to be very weary of. But I think, we kind of touched on a lot of these things, already in this conversation. I think it's just being mindful and being aware and knowing, where to pivot. No pun intended, Tracy. Just being mindful of everything. And I think Glenn, touched on it earlier. For publishers, the focus is always revenue until it's not. And so you just have to be, mindful and aware. I don't know if I'm directly answering your question, but it's business as usual at the end of the day is to be able to put out a good product. And, I feel like the rest will take care of itself, to be honest with you.
I think you underscored the main point now that we're hearing over and over again, which is continue to invest in relationship building, which is what you guys are doing right now at iNewsSource. So that sounds good to me. That answered the question. Glenn, let me come back to you now and ask you about both coming out on the other side, but any sort of final thoughts or recommendations that you might have for news publishers out there that are in a similar situation as we all are going to find ourselves in.
Well, I guess I would say that business is about numbers. It's easy, in my case at least, after a long career as a journalist, I launched with a journalist mindset, thinking about the news. It took a while for me to realize that business is really about numbers. It's about cash flow. It's about making sure that more money is coming in than going out. And it's really as simple as that. I mean, I'm not staffed at the level where I would like to be. They say that people who lived through the Great Recession, that it really impacted them and how they think of money and or whatever. I don't want to compare myself to that, but having worked through the Great Recession, where I saw a lot of my personal income or my personal savings go out the window. As I mentioned earlier, I probably put at least $300,000 into it during those early years. And that's not and I'll be honest, that's not, try telling your wife that, you're going to write another check to the company that's not bringing any money. So that left an indelible impression on me. I don't ever want to get back to the place where I'm having to put in my personal resources to make this business run. I don't want to get back to a place where we're depending on any outside sources other than our operating income to make it run. And so it's about budgeting. It's about watching those numbers, knowing where you are, having a budget, having a roadmap. Here's how much money we plan to spend this year on this and this on salaries. Here's how much money we plan to spend on technology, however you define that. Here's how much money we plan to spend on benefits or, however you look at that. And making sure that you stick to that budget, making sure that you project income, look down the road and see, I know for a fact that we've got, this contract that that they've said they're going to renew, and we've got that contract they said they're going to renew. And this one is already signed a renewal, but we haven't gotten the money yet. And try to project revenue down the road so you can see where you're going. Once again, it's about numbers. Business is about numbers. At the end of the day, whether you're running a news operations or a tech company or making cars. And so I guess that would be the advice that I would offer. Keep your eyes on those numbers and make sure you have more coming in than going out.
And I want to make sure we have time. We just got a question in. So I want to make sure I get this in before we run out of time here. It's I'm sorry if I get your name mispronounced here, Liuesa. And she says, speaking broadly, what do folks think the Pivot Foundation and like Knight have made towards supporting models instead of local newsroom? Has the Pivot actually hurt minoritized news leaders covering underserved communities?
I can jump in there actually, Zuri, because I read the piece that this person's referring to in the Neiman Lab, and I think it's a really interesting conversation because I serve on 2 boards for Online News Association, as you mentioned, Lion. And Lion does fantastic programming. Obviously, I'm biased, but I actually joined the board because I felt like they were actually delivering programming that was so tailored to the needs of local independent publishers like myself. So I think my answer is more nuanced. I actually think it would be great if foundations made direct investments into individual news organizations, of course. But I actually think in some ways investing in the ecosystem is the way to go, right? So here in Canada, the very different media ecosystem than in the States, the independent digital media upstarts are it's a burgeoning ecosystem. Usually Canadian media is quite consolidated and centralized. So this is a new phenomenon. So investing in the models and resources that support the ecosystem is a way to actually ensure the longevity and sustainability of all local independent news media outlets down the line. So I think it's a combination of both. But I wouldn't cast it as, oh no, it's a terrible thing that a lot of funding is going to these intermediate organizations because they're doing really good work. And they're the reason why this ecosystem oftentimes have existed. And myself, I'm part of these organizations, and I also run an independent local media organization. So I don't think they're mutually exclusive either.
Gotcha. I hope that answered your question. And Anita, while we have you on, do you have any final thoughts here?
I mean, no aside, I enjoyed this conversation so much. I learned so much from Justin and Glenn, truly. And I think the one takeaway that I'd like to give everybody who's listening is that I'm somebody who started off, like I already explained my background. I was a journalist. I'm not somebody who actually intuitively loved numbers, but I knew that what I wanted to do was support my local democracy by filling in a gap. And so there were so many resources and so many kind of existing kind of uh, support organizations that make it a lot easier to launch your own independent entrepreneurial news outlet. That I really encourage folks, even if you're having some trepidation or you're nervous about your own acumen, there are a lot of supports these days. And I think there needs to be more racialized media leaders out there. So I really encourage folks to take the plunge because it's something that I never imagined in my life that I would do because I always thought I was just going to be a journalist. And now on the publishing side, but I'm so happy for it because now I'm creating, I'm creating, employment opportunities for folks who are underserved. I'm doing something that is helping my local democracy. So it's super fulfilling. And I'm also building a lot of skills as well. So just wanted to add that.
Very fulfilling. Justin, any final thoughts?
No, not right off. I appreciate you guys inviting me to be a part of this terrific panel. I learned a lot, as Anita mentioned. I think Glenn makes some really good points, and looking at what Anita's doing with the Green Line, definitely am going to continue to follow what you're doing now even more closely. But no final thoughts. It's an uphill battle, as we all know as publishers and working within this ecosystem. So, all I can say is just continue to fight a good fight.
Well, thank you, Justin.
And I believe Tracy wanted to answer that question that came up in the chat, but she was muted.
Oh, Go ahead, Tracy.
Well, sorry, I'm multitasking. I'm tweeting and everything else. So, yeah, I saw that article too about intermediaries. I actually thought it was a very good, solid pieces of conversation that our industry has and needs to have. There are a lot of different kinds of intermediaries. So I think that the article may not have made a great enough distinction about the different kinds of intermediaries. The Pivot Fund actually invests in capacity building. So we provide dollars directly to the local newsroom, transformational dollars directly to the local newsroom, so that they can hire capacity. To me, capacity means people. Hire the right people to do the right jobs to help generate revenue that helps make that organization more sustainable. We do it in such a way that is renewable over a certain amount of time, and we kind of layer that with additional wraparound services, coaching, mentorship, tech, those kinds of things, so that you have exactly what you need in becoming more sustainable. So I wanted to just make that point that all intermediaries are not the same.
And I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to Tracy and the work that she is doing and has done. You're making a difference, and so thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that.
I see a comment. One more. Oh, I just realized you used the word pivot, but I definitely didn't mean to call y'all out. Well, thank you. I appreciate this. I was wondering if you meant to say the Pivot Fund in full. That's it for our time. I want to thank all of our wonderful panelists for giving us their time and insights. And if you're so inclined, please check out thegreenline.to, qcitymetro.com, and inewssource.org to see the phenomenal work that these organizations are doing that are represented here. And please, please, please check out rjionline.org to see the wonderful programs that the Donald W. Reynolds Journalism Institute is putting on. Lastly, you can support the Pivot Fund by visiting thepivotfund.org or by checking out the Pivot Fund store on Bonfire. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Tracy, for letting me moderate. And please have a wonderful evening. And if you take anything away from this, build relationships and watch your numbers. And from me, I'll say, stay ready. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.